Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, where we bring in different leaders from various fields of expertise. Today, we've got Clint Hinkle, who has a great track record in the sales world, has done it across various verticals, including in tech sales, but now is off doing his own thing. So I'll have him tell us a little bit about what you're working on and yeah, just share with us, what's the next chapter for you look like?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me. Just uh pivoted out of software sales. I was most recently at Zoom Info, um, which is one of the few tech companies where OTEs are actually obtainable. So kind of crazy in this environment to walk away from that, especially when I came in through the CEO. But yeah, just doing my own venture. Was doing a little bit of consulting, but now I'm going full speed into a real estate venture, and scaling that out. Got some investors, got a friend in the space who's having wild success. And so, kind of over the activity metrics, the limitations on what I can do with my time, how I have to spend my time, and just wanted to bet on myself.
There you go. Very cool. You don't have to share too much about what your new endeavor is. But I am curious as to like making that leap into entrepreneurship, right? You've done a little bit of that, you just stepped away from Zoom Info not too long ago, and done some consulting and that capacity, but now you're full bore on really kind of like building your own next thing or your own thing. But before we do that, let's talk about just like your background in sales, right? I know you started off um, doing all kinds of sales, more like in the consumer space, and then you ultimately evolved into the tech space. But tell us about how you landed into sales in the first place.
Yeah, so I've always been in some form of sales from, when I was in high school, having a mowing company, going door to door, pitching people, all the way through selling cell phones and HVAC in college. Um, did telemarketing for a while. So, satellite, cable, things like that. And then ultimately landed at Enterprise Rent a Car, which I'd say is my first kind of career job, and very transactional sale, high volume, but you had a wide variety of things to sell. And that's where that company was the first company I was at where it was performance based. So it had nothing to do with tenure. There was a crystal clear path on how to move up the ladder. And I had an hour long commute each way. I quit listening to music and I would only consume books on sales,
Well,
psychology, mentality, and I just consumed all these books and would role play at home in the car, and ultimately was the number one rep out of 600 for I was like 5 or 6 months in a row, won every award you can win, and in less than a year I was running and managing the one of the biggest locations in the country, with those reporting to me who had been at the company 2 to 3 years still in that entry level role. So I think for sales, I was a strong C+ student. But right in the group presentations, I was the person to present to the class. And I feel like sales is the ultimate equalizer, as far as, I'd never be a doctor or a lawyer or even make it through those schoolings, but sales, you can make the same. And so I just was very motivated, um, very, it was performance driven, and that motivated me to just want to become the best that I could be. And so that was really what jump started my career, along with they had great sales training, formal sales training there as well.
yeah. Did you ever play sports?
Yeah, played mainly baseball.
Yeah.
You know,
Interesting. Do you feel like any of those? I feel like a lot of like sales people come from like a competitive background of some sort, whether it's like from sports, from academics, or from even just like siblings. A lot of the times, where it's like that kind of has pushed that chip on their shoulder to kind of constantly like push them. Do you find any of that, or was that not really a factor and just kind of found it on your own?
yeah, I mean, I think, I'm definitely competitive just by nature in general. Whether it's a board game or whatever. But I think I just grew up with a situation where money was a constant issue,
Mm.
you know, you just barely getting by, you know, homeless at times, all this crazy stuff. So I just was more inspired to kind of make it, you know,
Yeah.
kind of defy the odds right. I had friends who had very successful parents, you know, and those are the people I kind of like looked up and aspired to be. And so I think a lot of it for me is just, you know, and I've gotten made fun of from the car my parent dropped me off in and where I lived and what I'm doing and all that. And so just the ultimate chip on my shoulder that I'm like, you know what, your situation's better than me, but you know, let's see where we're at in 20 years. Like I'm going to dominate, you know, my adult life. You know, I was paying for all my own, my car, my clothes, helping with the groceries in high school. So I think a lot of it more stems from just wanting to make it, like whatever that means. And that's kind of changed over the years as I've gotten older. But that's what was really a driving factor for me.
Interesting. And so then you know, before we went live, you mentioned that you went into then tech sales for the purpose of perhaps making it more lucrative in that world. Talk us through that experience. You know, and then obviously your last experience at Zoom Info, which was maybe bittersweet, but walk us through that.
Yeah, definitely. So like I was, you know, I was always reading like, you know, the highest earning sales jobs and all that. So I went through enterprise, did really well, and it led to a great opportunity. It turned into a VP of sales opportunity at a company I was at for 4 years. It was losing money, but I got it turned around, increased profit margins. I was controlling costs as much as I was increasing sales and building out a team. And we
Mm,
scaled up from 4 to 14 million, doubled our average profit margin, um, added additional product lines, just had a lot of success. And at an enterprise, when I took over that biggest location, it had been ran into the ground. So it was my first turnaround opportunity where like it wasn't textbook, it wasn't anything taught in school. I just was like, this is a problem. I got to figure that shit out. And we would just trial and error till we got it right, then move to the next problem. And then ultimately you build a strong foundation and a system you can scale. And so I did that again at another company. And I started making good money at the enterprise. You make no money, but I was making, you know, six figures at the other company, but I kind of really tapped out. It was a regional business. Me and the owner, basically I crushed it 1 year and they decided they didn't want to pay me based on the comp plan because that's just too much money. So
mm,
they decided 40% of what I earned was fair. Um, and so I started looking around and I started looking at like, you know, I was on some of the paid sites about like six-figure earners. And I was looking at what people were making in tech sales as a VP of sales. So during that 4 years where I scaled that business, I added multiple millions of dollars to the owner's uh, net worth, but I had no equity in the business. There's always this promise of equity, but it never happened. And then I looked at like I've done tons of $1 million deals. We closed a $25 million contract, and like that versus tech, like right, you close that in tech, you're making insane money versus, you know, $1 million deal in the world that I was in was like just it was okay money, but nothing crazy. And so I
because
wanted to get into tech.
because the margins are so different. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the margins are different. And the company I was running, we had to be profitable to scale. We couldn't raise capital to go hire more salespeople. I had to wait a year to get break even, then a year to get profitable, and then finally I had money to hire more people. So it's just slower, and less room for error. So I almost looked at moving to like San Francisco or a major market. But the problem was is I was already making really or pretty good money in a low cost of living area.
Mm,
So to take a pay cut and then move into some of the highest cost of living areas in the country, and I had a daughter at the time, wife. Um, so decided not to do it. Fast forward, I'll skip a few spots, but COVID happened.
yeah.
I was at a startup, innovative waste company in the waste industry. ended up getting laid off. We're still good terms to this day, but it was just, it wasn't a profitable business. COVID hit. And so then that kind of opened the door because then tech was going remote. And that's when I got heavy on LinkedIn. And was like, okay, this could be that opportunity to get into tech. And
Mhm.
after applying to 200 jobs, not getting an interview, I started getting in communities. I had a friend had success putting out content, so I started posting on LinkedIn. And 30 days after posting, I landed a job that was, um, 250 OTE, which I'd never had an OTE like that. I'd made around 150 previously, and I had it was like a 150 base, 250 OTE as an enterprise sales director. And this was before inflation went crazy.
Yep.
So it was actually, it'd be like 175, 180 base today. And it was awesome. It was a startup. We, did really consulting with Fortune 1000 tech companies. The founders and the guy I reported to, these guys had run billion-dollar divisions for huge publicly traded companies. Um, and it was an amazing opportunity, but things happened outside of my control. Company had funding issues, laid off. So basically, tech, I bounced around. I've been at two pre-seed or two seed companies that ran into funding issues. Those two jobs were so much fun. I loved it. I was at two larger companies post acquisition. All the previous salespeople, the previous 5 years had been printing money. Even B players were making
Yeah.
crazy money, and the A players are making seven figures. Well, acquisition, comp plans cut in half, quotas significantly raised. Um, in both cases, too, they had too many reps for what
Mhm.
was left to go after in the market. Um, so two really big waste of times, to be honest. Um, and then Zoom Info popped up. I put out some content around Zoom Info that got a lot of traction. Um, Led to the CMO DMing me, and then I just sent the CEO a cold email. He replied, and I sent this Hail Mary kind of pitch that he was either going to think I was crazy or he was going to love it. Um, he loved it, connected me with the CRO, and then the rest is kind of history on that. It took a while, but ultimately got on there. But so it's been a long, these past 4 years have been, just difficult due to things outside of my control.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I feel like you probably got into the software tech sales space like right towards the dip of that hyper growth period. I mean, in some of these other conversations with tech salespeople that have been doing this for a couple of decades, I mean, they've written out a few cycles of it, right? Which is like a few recessions and a few booms and busts and stuff. And I mean, it's been challenging, I would say, like the past 3, 4 years for sure. And a lot has shifted. That being said, though, I think like you speak a lot about like I think a skill set that is probably like largely missed and something that I'm noticing that a lot of like tech sales leaders that are realizing this, that they need to like re-steer the ship, which is I think like commodity based selling, which is, no real core differentiator in your product from the competitive landscape, but knowing how to build the relationships and sell. I feel like that's something where it's very much more applicable today, but leaders are still having to catch up and do that. What is your hot take on just on that kind of ideology now where it's like you can't run the same playbooks as that's been working for the past 5 years and there needs to be a shift or evolution. Seems like you dealt with it from the employee perspective, but anything you can kind of speak on that in terms of like being in that mix and then any frustrations that you were seeing that maybe from some of your previous experience, not in tech sales, that actually worked really well, that could carry over.
Yeah, I'd say what I saw, in I guess kind of like the last two roles was, you know, just do more of the same at higher
Mhm.
volume.
Mm,
We need to be making more dials. We need to be sending more emails. And it was less about strategy and more just about activity. And in both cases, they weren't really too open to uh, new ideas. Or they may be open to you doing different stuff, but within a very tight box. So you can maybe word the email how you want or send a video. So you had some freedom, but compared to like what I've experienced, in my career prior to tech and the two seed stage companies, I was both in leadership roles where I
mm-hmm.
had budget, I had freedom. So those roles, if I needed 10 grand for something or I needed to hire people, like I had that ability. So in these last two roles, one is an enterprise seller, one is a corporate, I just had no seat at the table and no
Interesting.
one gave a shit about my opinion. I'm very much a strategy guy, and I'm very much like if something isn't working, like let's try new stuff. So in my last two roles, it was just like the percent, like it's funny, like title, the perception, like when I've had fancy titles or decent titles or whatever, my words just seem to carry so much more value. Whereas I may be at a company where I don't have that title, but I still have that exact same experience. I've still taken two failing companies and turned them around on my own. I had no consultants helping me. I had no, you know, gurus doing anything. And it wasn't based on a fancy education. It was just instinct and trial and error.
Yeah.
And then I done one startup where I was the second hire and built everything from scratch. I got legislation passed in that role. I did all this stuff. And then I get in these roles, my last two roles, and it's like they don't care. And it's not in tech, so therefore it's not relevant. I actually made a comment on someone's post today talking about enterprise rent a car and how they do like 90 million a day or something. Like it dwarfs people, these tech companies. I think there's
Yeah.
something. And and I highlighted in that role like how what I did there was 1,000 times more difficult, more demanding in every single way than any tech job I've ever had, and way more fast paced than any startup I've been at.
Mm,
Um, so I kind of getting off track here, but they don't really value what I've seen,
yeah.
anyone's opinion on anything you've done that hasn't been in tech. Um, and in my last role, they're very stuck on what I would consider more used car sales. It's funny, these tech people think they're so fancy, but like, dude, I'm telling you, my last role, like what's being coached, what's being done. I did use car sales for like a brief period in the enterprise division. Um, I'm telling you, the best used car salespeople in the world would dominate at my last role, hands down. And the top sellers, not strategic or enterprise, but the top, commercial mid-market sellers would dominate selling used cars as well. Like it's funny, they think they're special, but it's like it's the same shit, different industry.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's like, I mean, that's a frustrating part. I think like, especially some of these like tech behemoths where they've gone from disruptor to disruptee and they're like now, so difficult to change. And I think a lot of it too is even startups, even like earlier stage companies that they work within like this finite box, like you kind of described, of like what they're open to playing with, and the reality is that you probably have to kind of remove all borders and then be able to try a lot more different things in order to find the thing that's going to actually work for you. Um, because if it's just the same types of people in the same industries doing the same channels, same messaging, that the end user, the prospect is just inundated with that and not having the ability to put their attention on any one thing. They're just kind of being bombarded and not being receptive. Um, which it seems like ultimately that was like the biggest frustration for you to then go off and start your own thing. So now you're in the process of doing that. You had mentioned you raised a little bit of investment money. But talk about that transition, right? Like, I mean, I haven't worked for anybody for probably, I don't know, 25 years. I I just now so accustomed to it, but I remember that epiphany moment for me, which is just like I can't do this ever again. That was like maybe my early 20s. And what was and then since then it's just kind of working for yourself. But what has that experience been like for you? What are maybe some of the expectations that you have going into this? Maybe some expectations you don't have that's probably good for you, but and what are some of the risks that you had to assess to then make that leap? Um, Going from an environment where obviously you may not love the environment, but like it could have, you could still try to grind it out, make something consistent, a little bit more predictable, but going into this, which is less of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I didn't mention is, getting into tech. My original goal getting into tech was, okay, if I can tack on 75 to $100,000 more than what I've been earning for the past, 6 to 7 years, I can maintain my same lifestyle and stack all that. And then my end goal was to buy a cash flowing business to scale, because I realized what my skill set is I'm not really the idea guy, but I can take something that's somewhat working or somewhat got some traction, and I can figure out how to put strong, repeatable systems in place to minimize mistakes, because enterprise customer service mattered just as much as sales. And so you had to have all these backstops to keep the ball from dropping. That was like one of the biggest things I actually did that one turnaround. But so I know like I'm really good at taking something and making it better. So that was my original goal with tech, but it's just, not, it didn't end up playing out like that. And so fast forward to these past few months, you know, Zoom Info is pretty, what I will say about them, they do a good job of promoting within, they reward hard work. Um, it's very demanding job, but your quotas are at least obtainable. I was 140% the quota Q1. That was ramp quota transparently, but still that's better than what I'd seen in any other tech company I'd been at. And that said, though, I did take a pay cut to take that job. I didn't quite do my homework on how they paid out their commission, and it's different than the other company I was at. And so I was kind of in a situation where I'm like, not really making enough money to cover my bills. Um, and and then I broke down after taxes what I'm making. I'm like, I could trip and fall and make this. Just between my network and ability. So, it was a tough decision, but basically I have a friend of mine who's founded, bootstrapped, and sold 3 companies. He has a fourth one he founded and bootstrapped that's still profitable, that he's not really even in anymore. That's doing very well. And he had an exit last year and got into real estate to try and offset a pretty good size exit, his tax burden. Ended up, and in the meantime, after exiting that business, he had a VP of sales role making about 400 or 500K a year, but still dealing with the bullshit of a company he doesn't own. And the route I'm going down in the real estate, he went down and kind of accidentally fell into a situation where, you know, like he kind of accidentally made like 95 grand in 1 month on something that he wasn't even really trying. And then kind of basically kind of hit pay dirt, struck gold. And this is somebody I've had a relationship with. I mean, I have a testimonial on my horrible website that I made myself a few years ago, from him, because I did some consulting work for him. His past company had was a sponsored me in some things, and so we just have a great relationship. It's somebody, when things get sideways in my life, I'm reaching out to. And so he spent 2 months just giving me the play by play. He walked away from his, $500,000 job, and went all in on this, and was just having incredible success. And so I was kind of hit a breaking point at Zoom Info. You know, the Friday before Easter, I wanted to take 2 hours off because I was heading out of town to see family. They told me I wasn't allowed because it was end of the quarter, and I was sitting at 140% the quota. And my manager knew you keep your calendar open there and they fill it up. I kept my calendar open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day for 3 months in a row. My manager kept telling me I didn't have to work that late. I did 10 o'clock demos before. So I've been putting in at least 60 hours a week, and I'd never asked for anything. And so when I wanted to take start my morning 2 hours later because I was heading out of town and I was told I wasn't allowed because it was end of quarter and all this other stuff, like I've always worked hard, but that's like one of the first times I've ever been told no. Um, and then they were given spiffs to work like Easter Day. And like I got like 30 emails between Saturday and Sunday from leadership. Instead of the wins channel in Slack, they were putting it in email so they knew everyone would check it. And in my enterprise days, I was the guy that would be closing deals Easter Day to
Yeah.
stand out to leadership and get ahead. But I have two young kids now,
Yeah.
like, wife that works and I'm just like, that's why I don't want to knock Zoom Info. It's like that job would have been perfect for me where I was at about 12 or 13 years ago. I would have loved it and would have made a ton of money. Um, and then there's just so many activity metrics there. Basically, I just was miserable. I was hitting my number, and then one day I was told I can't have my calendar blocked off for lunch and should be taking meetings. And I was like, it's not like I'm putting up with all this and hating life and working hard and making really good money where I'm like, man, this sucks, but damn, my bank account looks great. I'm like, this is the least amount of money I have made in over 10 years.
Mm.
Um, and
It's miserable, man.
and I'm miserable. And it's like, yes, I could eventually get some higher paying jobs there. I mean, I was transparently, as long as I hit my number, I was fast tracked. Like, listen, I could text the CRO right now as info and he'd reply. We left on good terms. When I made the post on LinkedIn that I was leaving, I didn't knock him. I like what I said in the post. This job would have been perfect for me many years ago. But once you've had decision making and had the power and autonomy I've had in the business to go back to a role where somebody is telling me how often I have to follow up, what I have to say, what I have to do, it makes sense for someone early in their career. But so fast forward, I'm still talking to Colin Mitchell, my friend, LinkedIn top voice as well, who's doing the real estate thing. And then basically it was a Friday, and I was like, called Colin. I said, man, I don't have a lot of money saved up. I was like, I'm thinking about, doing it. And the deal was for me to come help him on a commission only basis for 3 months, and then he would give me the blueprint to do my own. And called him and I was like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And like, I just made the decision. And I'll tell you what, man, the second that weekend was incredible. It was like the biggest weight was lifted off my shoulder. And then when I resigned that Monday, like I only had 2 months of runway to figure things out. Nobody at all willing to invest. Of course, I asked some people. I have some people who follow me that make quite a bit of money, but you know, no light to investment, no safety net, nothing. I didn't build something on the side first because working that Zoom Info job, you don't have time to build anything on the side. So yeah, man, I quit. And it was the stress. I thought all my stress was around finances, but when I quit that job, even though I had very little money in the bank or like a clear path how this was going to work, my stress levels just went to zero, or practically zero compared to where they were at.
Yeah.
And I've just been the happiest I've been in years ever since. And so yeah, that was kind of, I didn't know if it was the right decision. And then once like I felt how I felt after I did it, I was like, this was definitely the right decision.
Mhm.
Um, and then I 2 weeks later made the post that I was leaving Zoom Info, and ironically enough, off that post, I think that post got like 150,000 impressions and 900 likes, and I had job offers from that post, potential consulting opportunities. My investor, I had somebody who's followed me for years, just wanted me to tell him what I was doing. Told him, he was like, if you had capital to do it on your own, could you get where you need to go quicker? And I was like, yeah. He's like, how much do you think you need? And I kind of gave him a number, and he offered a little bit more to give me some cushion. Now, I will tell you this, it wasn't like I just got the
Yeah,
money like
yeah,
that. It was putting together projections, putting together the
yeah,
plan, and then there was
yeah,
that person had made two major life events happen during the negotiation, finalizing this contract, that it's amazing it didn't fall through. So, people want to assume like this was just easy and I got lucky. It was, some doors got open that I didn't see, but once they got open, they weren't just, ooh, somebody wrote a check. It was still very, very hard. But yeah, man, and so that's where I'm at. So, I got essentially 3 months of runway for the business and 3 months of runway for myself. Which just isn't software. This is a company that's it's either it's going to be profitable quick or it's just going to fail. But based on what my friends doing, the budget I have, it's I'm pretty confident we'll be good. But I don't really know if I even answered your question, but that's just kind of like what I went through emotionally, the thought process.
yeah,
Ultimately, I just had to say F it and like just, take a chance.
yeah. I mean, well, take a chance on yourself too, right? I think that's the main thing here. It's that, congratulations to that too, man. I mean, I think like, you're really pursuing the entrepreneurial journey and all the things that that entails. But I think with your background too, um, that's probably giving you the confidence to be successful at it. And I think that, you know, the way that you kind of just described that journey and the weight being lifted, I think that that's just you're gonna be able to find your bearings no matter what. I think that's you have confidence in your skill set, which is what's going to play out here anyways. And even like change everything is a sales game anyways from in entrepreneurship, right? It's like even when you're working in a sales role, it's very entrepreneurial. And I think like that's probably appealing more to your strengths now, more so than ever. And now you have equity tied to the byproduct of whatever it is that you're creating. So sounds like a super exciting chapter for you. I know we're a little bit over time, but just want to say thanks for sharing your journey because I do feel that there's a lot of people out there is probably like sitting on the fence, similar to how you may have been. And I know that the tech sales landscape has evolved a lot. There's a lot of people out there that have, maybe seen a boom period and now they're struggling to find their legs and have been maybe thinking about going off on their own. And I think they can maybe listen to what you experienced and your reasons why, maybe go back to your LinkedIn post, the explanation there, and maybe gives them the courage or confidence to start something on their own also.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you this, ever since quitting, there's opportunity everywhere, especially if you're willing to do, you know, commission only, like right, vet, I don't believe what they tell you. You got to really vet things out, or picking up fractional work or consulting work. Like I'm not saying it's easy, but like I see people on LinkedIn posting that they've been looking for a job for 6 months. And I just want to be like, as somebody who's been laid off 4 times, like if you don't have a job by 6 months, you're doing something wrong. And like at that point, if you're going that long without, if you made it 6 months without income, why the hell did you just start a service business that costs no money to start? Um, and so I know you got to go, but last thing, so I've pitched some commission only opportunities with my new business, like my friend, like what I quit my job for is commission only opportunity. And I've led 5 sales teams. So I have a lot of people who've worked for me, or not, a decent amount. Most people aren't willing to bet on themselves. Most of them are in roles where they're making 80 to 110K and they're not happy at their jobs. And I offered them a world of, you know, 10 to 30 grand a month, roughly. It's commission only. Once you get up to speed, should be 30 grand, somewhere in there. And if we really scale this, there's more opportunity. Can I do it part-time, or can I do it on the side, or can I do it like, and I've talked to some other business owners as well about commission only and different things like that. And I don't know I mean, it took me until 40 years old to fully bet on myself.
Mm.
Granted, the upside the risk reward is either if I fail, I can always file bankruptcy and get another job. But if it works, I'm retiring my wife in the next 6 months. Like that's the opportunity I have in front of me.
Yeah,
And so I just encourage people to like, if you're not happy and you don't have to have a lot of runway, you don't have to build a side hustle on the side first, you can make take an educated risk, I guess you could say, and go for it.
absolutely. On that note, I think we'll end it, but thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks for sharing your story and your insights.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Of course.